Hey guys, welcome back to my new episode of Chapter 2 NSCA CSCS, and this is the second episode of the Chapter 2. So, guys, this is very important topic because here I'll be covering about lever class system, which is most important when it comes to exercise, right? So, lever is like a machine, right? So, it's important that we also know what lever class system is, and basically it's about body movements, it's about lever, it's about basically what happens lever when it comes to movement or exercise. Your body is using your skeleton, your bones as lever, right? So lever is just a rigid, I will say a rigid rod, right, on which your muscle attaches and help produce movement, right? So muscle will apply force onto the levers or the lever arm to create movement, right? So it's about biomechanics. It's about the system which will ensure that you know how much of load how much of a load your muscle can actually lift, and positioning yourself can actually lessen the effort or increase the effort, right? So now what you want to understand here is from the exercise point of view, that when it comes to exercise, what you can do is you can make exercises easy, and you can also make exercises difficult by just adjusting your body position, right? So same is with sports, right? So just by adjusting your body position, you can actually lessen the effort and I will say improve the output. It's like doing a deadlift, right? So being in wrong position will affect your foundation, the weight that you can lift, and positioning yourself in the right way will ensure that your effort is less and then the output you can lift more weights, right? Which is very important when it comes to sports. And that is the reason why we see when it comes to running mechanics, what you see at the start is the position that they take, right? And eventually what happens, they change their position as they run forward to ensure that they reach the peak velocity, right? So positioning your body will help you perform better and also minimize the chance of injury, right? So in this chapter, what we learn here is about sports, it's about exercise, it's about lever class system, which is more like machine, right? And how your muscles can apply force to produce movement, right? So here, let's understand some key term concepts. A lever is simply a rigid bar around which rotate around which actually rotates around the pivot, right? So pivot is basically a fulcrum or a joint, right? So now if you take this arm as a lever, this as pivot, so what you see is this is actually rotating, right? So rotating, what exactly is the confusion is when I say people, when we ask people to do neck rotation, this is what they do, right? So this is not rotation, this is circumduction. For rotation, the axis has to be fixed, right? So what is an axis? Axis is a point or a line around which rotation happens, right? So if I take example of neck rotation, I should be doing this, right? So I have an axis that moves from the top to the bottom, allows me to perform movement, which is called rotation. What you can see it even in a bicycle, right? The axis is fixed and it rotates. So this is what you need to know about rotation, and there's a big confusion between rotation and circumduction, right? For laymen, when it comes to rotation, you may find them doing this still okay, but then actual rotation is this, right? So if I say I want to do shoulder rotation, then I will have to do this, right? I cannot do this. This will be circumduction, right? So for lever class system, you have a lever, which is a rigid bar. Then you have a fulcrum, which is the joint, right? Or the pivot around which rotation happens, right? And then you have the muscle force. The force of muscle is basically created by muscle contraction, right? It's like you doing a bicep curl or or a squats, right? So in that you also have something called as resistive force, the opposing force, right? Something that's stopping you to perform that movement or complete that movement. It's like I'm doing a bicep curl, and the muscle force is actually coming from my bicep muscles insertion, which is on the forearm, but then I have some resistive force. The weight that I'm using is not allowing or holding me back from completing this movement, right? So now this is important. Then you have something called as movement arm or a torque arm, right? So for this, I may need, so let's say this is your fulcrum. right? And this is the load, right? So the distance from the fulcrum till the load is your momentum, right? So the momentum is the distance from the fulcrum to the load. This is again your momentum and also called can be called as a torque arm, right? So torque arm. So what happens is the longer the momentum, right? So if it keeps increasing, what is going to happen? The weight is going to be felt too heavy, right? That's the reason why people who are short will find lifting heavy weights more easy because they have shorter momentum, right? People who are long will have difficulty lifting heavy weights because of long arm, right? It's like you doing a lateral race with your arm position this way. This is going to be easy because of the short momentum. But then if I keep my arm extended and try to do lateral race, it is going to be more challenging because of longer torque or momentum, right? So the longer the momentum or torque arm, the more difficult or more torque you can generate, right? So torque is actually the rotatory force that you experience around the joint, right? It's like this. So if you want to be in a slab competition, right, you need to have long arm because these long arm is going to help generate more rotatory forces. That's the reason what we see a scooty, right? A scooty will not have maximum speed or will not uh, uh, be able to run as fast as a two-wheeler or a bike can, right? Because a bike will have more big tires, right? The tires will be large in size with more much bigger torque arm compared to a scooty which will have a small torque, right? So this big torque arm will generate more rotatory force, allowing it to run much faster than a scooty, right? So now torque is simply the force and the distance from the joint, right? So your momentum and torque arm can be the same, right? But then the size of the momentum will increase and decrease depending on the exercise that you are doing, right? Suppose if I say I'm doing a lateral raise from this position, so this is the start. So I will have a small momentum, but as the weight moves up, right, the size of the momentum is going to actually increase, right? So now the weight here will be felt lighter compared to the weight here, right? Because of the size of the momentum, right? So torque can be measured by the force and the distance from the joint, right? So torque is basically the rotational forces that you experience around a joint that help twist, right? So that help you twist. So moving further, let me just clear. So this is the most important concept that you need to know before you actually move into the level class system, right? So the level class system we have three level class system. The first is let's just cover this level class one, right? So lever is basically a rigid bar that actually rotates around the fulcrum, right? So now if I say this is the fulcrum, there is this rigid bar, that's one lever, and there's one more on this side, right? So now this is your lever, this is your fulcrum, right? And then you also have your force, right? So now let's see in this picture what you can see. This is more like a lever class one, right? Which is again, see the lever class will change depending on the placement of all these things, right? Which is your fulcrum, which is your applied force, right? Sorry, applied force and also the resistive force, right? So what you see is here is this force applied, and what you see is here is the resistance, right? So what you see is the two down arrows both pushing down. So the distance from the fulcrum, right? From the fulcrum till here, right? This can be called as MAF, right? Which is the moment arm of applied force, right? Someone pushing down, right? And here the distance from the FR, right? Till the fulcrum. This is your moment arm of resistive force, right? So in this, what you see, this is like a seesaw which has a fulcrum in the center. One side you have your force arm, and one side you have your resistance arm, right? So moment arm of applied force and moment arm of resistive force, right? So this is the first level class system where the fulcrum is in the center, and now this can give you important, right? So now what is it? Where do you find it? You find it mostly around your neck, right? So here at your neck, you have your first class lever where your head is acting as resistance, your neck joint, right, is acting as a fulcrum, and then you have your muscles of the neck which act as applied force, right? Effort, right? That's where the effort or the applied force is coming from, right? So here in this, what you understand is you will have mechanical advantage or disadvantage or balance equilibrium depending on the fulcrum placement, right? So if the fulcrum this comes close to the load, what happens? The weight becomes easy, right? Because you need less effort to push the weight down, right? And if I move this fulcrum close to the effort, what will happen? You will need more effort to lift this weight up, right? So you can have mechanical advantage, you can have mechanical disadvantage, and you can also have equilibrium depending on the fulcrum placement, right? So if it's in the center, you will see balance, right? One person on this side, one on the other side, both able to move the weight with comfort. But then if this comes here, this one becomes more easy, and if the fulcrum comes too close to the effort, then it becomes tough, right? So here what you can see, if you want to lift something up with less effort, this fulcrum has to come close to the load, which you can see it in this image, right? So if I remove the fulcrum and put it here, then this guy will have to put in more effort to lift that load, right? So in gym, it is okay because gym, your intention may be muscle you may want your muscle to experience maximum mechanical stress, right? That may be the case, but then outside, when it comes to working outside or in a sport, you don't want that, right? You want your performance, right? So you don't want to increase your effort. You actually want to lessen your effort for more output, right? So this is what you need to know. So if fulcrum close to the load, then mechanical advantage. Why mechanical advantage? Because this effort arm is actually bigger than the this, right? Which is the load arm, right? So I will say here what you can see here. So this is MAF, right? So the moment arm of applied force is bigger than the moment arm of resistive force, right? So now the formula is simple, right? So if you want to find out, what you do is, if let's say if this is 40 inches, the distance from fulcrum to the effort, and if you see this, if this is 5 inches, sorry, if this is 4, let's take it as 4, right? So now if I divide 40 by 4, I get 10, right? Which is plus. So if your, what do you call that? Uh, for mechanical advantage, right? What you see here, for if you want to calculate mechanical advantage, what you need is mm divided by mr, right? So mm is moment arm of applied force, and what is mr is moment arm of resistive force, right? So if I say 40 divided by 4, I get the answer as 1, right? So if one, that means if the answer is about 1, then it's mechanical advantage. If the answer is 1, then it's equilibrium. And if the answer is less than 1, then it is a mechanical disadvantage, right? So there are two places where you experience, where you actually use your first class lever. One is your neck and one is your tricep elbow extension, right? So here, what you see here, you have a mechanical disadvantage because see, here is your fulcrum. So the distance from the fulcrum to the resistance or load, right? Which is, I will say, MRF, right? So moment arm of resistive force, and the distance from the fulcrum to the insertion of your tricep muscle, right? So basically you have to identify where the insertion, right? So what you see here is the fulcrum is in the between. One side is the insertion, right, which is the applied force, and the other side is the resistive force, right? So the distance from the fulcrum to the applied force, right, which is from the insertion of the tricep muscle. This is why it's important to know where insertion and outlet is, right? So now if you see this distance, this is more like a 5 centimeter. If you see this distance, this is more like 40 centimeter, right? So now if I see here, the mechanical advantage formula states that MR, which is, sorry, MM, right? So the moment arm of applied force, which is 5 centimeters, divided by moment arm of resistive force, which is 40, right? So the answer goes below 0.125, which is below 1, right? So whenever it is below 1, then it's mechanical disadvantage. Whenever the sum comes down to 1, then it's equilibrium. And whenever the sum comes above 1, then that means it's a mechanical disadvantage, right? So doing tricep extension can be is one of the exercise which has the greatest mechanical disadvantage because of the weight away from the fulcrum, and the lever class system that you are using is first. And since the fulcrum is closer to the effort and uh, and away from the resistance, that causes a lot of mechanical disadvantage. That makes it more tough for us to lift a lot of weight while you are doing tricep extensions or push down. A lot of people can manage that, but then knowing this will ensure that you will not try to lift a lot of weight on tricep extension because it has mechanical disadvantage. So I will not say everyone who does tricep extension will get injured. There is a high possibility of injury or risk because of the lever class system. To see to it that now, if you know this, you position yourself, or maybe choose exercises that gives you more advantage. Gym, it is okay because here it's not about generate, or it's not about how much weight you can lift. It's all about uh, making your tricep experience a lot of mechanical tension. But then outside, where it's about sports or performance, you want to have that advantage, and you don't want to push anyone in this position because you will not be able to generate a lot of force, right? So this was it with the level class system, and this was only about the first class system. So I'll just quickly summarize. First class level system can have advantage, disadvantage, or equilibrium, right? So the advantage will be when the fulcrum is closer to the load, disadvantage when the fulcrum is close to the effort, and equilibrium when the fulcrum is actually between the load, which is right at the center, right, where the applied force is equal to the resistive force, right? So if the answer comes below 1, then it's disadvantage. If the answer comes 1, then it's equilibrium. If the answer comes more than 1, then it is, what do you call that? It is disadvantage, right? So what you need to know is this formula, which is mechanical advantage, right? For this, what you need to know is you need to know this distance, right, which can be just approximate, and also the distance, right? So now we have this distance, which is your applied force always divided by your resistive force, and whatever answer you get, right? So this was it with this chapter, guys. I hope you are watching my videos, liking it, and also sharing, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you, guys.